The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony, his co-hosts, and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 38 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 21st of April, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios somewhere in Southern California. On this episode of Squawk Ident, I am excited to be joined by my Squawk Ident crew and co-hosts, Captain Roger and Rob D. We've been talking about and reading your feedback, and I must say, we agree with those of you that have reached out to us. All of us are being bombarded in our daily lives with the news and stories and speculation surrounding this virus. Admittingly, even our last few shows have been no exception to that fact. We've been listening to your feedback and have been talking about getting back to what we do best here at Squawk Ident, and that is discussing the journeys in aviation. Today we will discuss our recent flight schedules, or lack thereof, and we talk about how long we can get our beards to grow before we need to shave them off before we need to go flying again. We also dive into a segment called Remember When, where we explore some of the lessons that we picked up in our general aviation flight training all those years ago, and how those early moments have shaped how we as aviators operate today. So whether you're working from home in your respective solitude, binge watching some totally obscure shows, or out there in public doing your essential part, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, right after a brief word from our sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. It has been a while since the last show, and today we're going to start off by finding out what the crew has been up to since episode 37. But before we get into that, I would like to start off by taking a moment to recognize all the frontline people out there, the medical professionals that continue to sacrifice their personal safety and well-being in order to care for us without hesitation or a second thought. From the doctors and nurses to the EMTs and the firefighters, law enforcement officers and grocery store workers, to the hospitality employees, transportation workers, and all the other essential workers out there, from the Squawk Ident family to yours, thank you for all that you do. And let's get started. Joining us on the show today is a co-host here on Squawk Ident, and currently a DFW-based 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines, the name we use here on Squawk Ident as an alias to our employer. From his fortress of isolation in Flower Mound, Texas, he is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, and a pickleball master. Help me in welcoming back to the show, Mr. Rob D. Rob, how are you?
What's up, Tony? I'm doing really good. How you doing? It's good to hear you. Good to see your face again.
Thank you. It's been pretty good. It's been a lot of work at home. Been doing a lot of yard work and whatnot, as I saw that you were doing as well, cleaning some gutters out there, have you?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of stuff around the house. A lot of things that have been on the honey-do list for a while, and one of those things where you say, "Oh, I'll get to it when I have time," and oh my God, do I have time? So I've been doing a lot of stuff. So breaking my back and getting a good workout, getting up on the ladder and cleaning out the gutters and putting in some leaf guards in there so the leaves don't go in there. And yeah, it's just been nonstop since I got back from work.
Yeah, and the last trip you flew was actually the trip you were on the last show, was it not?
That's right. Yeah, the last show, I think it was episode 37. I was in New Orleans or New Orleans,
Hmm.
and yeah, I flew one flight back the next day, and that was the last flight I've done since this episode. And so I've been off, and coincidentally, I have a vacation now too. So um, went into about 10 days off, and then just started my vacation the other day. So
Wow, so you
I
really
don't
do
even
have
know what
time.
day it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a lot of time. I don't know what day it is. I hardly know what time it is. So
Well, but that's
I
not
just hope I
very
get a
unusual, is it, though, for us?
I I set an alarm for when I have to report in, at the end of the month. So at least when that thing goes off, at least I know I got to shave and get to work.
Yeah. Well, also joining us today is another exceptional aviator and co-host here on Squawk Ident. He joins us from his bat cave somewhere in San Diego, California. He is a professional CFI, MEI flight instructor, a former Embraer 145 airline pilot, a King Air instructor, and a captain for a corporate operator as well. He has type ratings in the Embraer 145, the Lear 60, the Falcon 50, 2000, and 7X. Please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing good. So,
Good to hear.
you were on a trip. You were ferrying an airplane around, getting the interior done. Was that completed?
No, they told us it was going to be at least 2 weeks. In this case, time is not really of the essence, so they'll probably get it done. Just it kind of actually makes more sense for us. Even if they did finish it, we probably won't go out there for another few weeks, just because the way that we do the engines, we try and run the engines every 3 to 4 weeks as it is. And so even if it was done, we'd probably just leave it out there in order to accomplish the engine run procedures, if nothing else. So we're just kind of sitting here on standby. I did talk to the other guy, and it does look like probably in middle of May or so, things could start picking back up. So we're all kind of looking forward to that.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Well, here I am. I have not flown at all. My entire month, as we've mentioned before, got canceled due to this whole reduction of flying that's happening because of the current situation that the world is in. And I've been at home my entire month. I was originally planning on flying a trip, which included a red eye to Miami, a short layover in Miami, and then one leg back on the 30th, but that disappeared as well. And so I've been home, and it's kind of really a blessing because I have not really had to worry about, you know, being out there in the public and wearing a mask. And, we've been having a lot of family time and a lot of yard work. As a matter of fact, we thought this year we would only plant a small garden, and it's turned out about 1,000 square feet in my backyard, which is the bulk of it, has now become a monstrous garden. We've now started to till areas of land around the house, on the side of the house, in front of the house, and slowly we're starting to plant, fruits and vegetables and all kinds of garden accoutrement of vegetables and whatnot everywhere we can find space, because we figure, hey, if we can grow our own, why do we need to go to the grocery store every week or so? We can probably, it might take a month or so to germinate, but we've already starting to see the kale and the bok choy and the chard and the lettuce and the carrots and tomatoes all start to sprout. So it's been exciting, to say the least.
That's awesome, man.
And what about with you? What have you guys been up to?
Well, it's kind of been a little bit of the same for us. I just live in a condo complex, so I don't have the yard work that you guys have. You got your 1,000 square foot garden. I have a 1,000 square foot condo. We did actually also put an above ground planter in just a few days ago. And we put a couple tomato plants. So I might put something else in. So that was the extent of the outdoor work. I did also mount my rear speakers in the in the family room a few days ago. Also, got onto the.
How long have you been putting that off?
We probably shouldn't report on that aspect. It was about a year ago. I broke down and I got a surround sound setup, and they're just bookshelf speakers for the rear speakers, and they've just been sitting on a couple bookshelves. But I wanted to free up the room, and now it seemed like as good a time as any. I've really been saving them for a good time like this. So actually, I feel like I'm accomplished. I did what I wanted. I occupied some of my time, a whole 30 minutes, drilling some holes, finding some studs, drilling some holes, and now I have some. The speakers look a little bit bigger now that they're mounted on the wall, which I think is kind of awesome. Now, what other people think of it, I'm not really sure, but I did get them mounted, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself now.
So you mounted these things
of my last week.
Did you watch a surround sound film right after you mounted them?
That's the unfortunate. Let's just go with the unfortunate thing about having two small kids in the house. The two small kids in the house, like, you can't really watch anything exciting during the day because, like I say, I'm in a condo. It's not like I have the theater room or anything. Yeah. And so the kids are always around. And then what happens at night is they go to bed, and it's not like I can, shake the neighbors out, which I don't really care so much about, but because I've still got the kids upstairs. Yeah. And if they don't sleep, then my day the next day is going to be terrible. Yeah. So unfortunately, while the sound is nice, I am not able to get the full value or the full appreciation out of the setup because of two small children.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
I hear you. I've got a movie theater above this garage here, full surround sound, subwoofer. I got a 65-inch screen, and man, I rattle the walls off this house with
I
that
bet you
thing.
The neighbors love that.
I couldn't imagine living in an apartment complex and having that thing, above, below, or beside me.
In my next life, in my future dreams, I have plans to be able to make this a reality where I don't have anybody around me for a couple acres and my own room, and I'm going to shake the whole thing out. I didn't go full blast, but I got a bunch of clip speakers and.
Yeah, sweet clip horns.
They're two floor I got 2 floor standings for the front ones. I mean,
are they the RF speakers? Or are they just regular, just standard?
They're the reference Premier.
Yeah, RF ones. Yeah, those are sweet. Yeah. I used to sell those a long time ago, prior to flight instructing days and everything. Yeah. Remember in Phoenix, Ultimate Electronics?
Yeah.
Were you there?
Yeah. We talked about that too. Place. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Circuit City kind of esque.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're going back. Circuit City.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
We're going back today.
Yeah. And clips were like my favorite speakers back then, man, and they still are. I love those things. I
think they're a good brand name speaker, and so I didn't go top of the line. I think there's a higher end. But I didn't get the bottom of the barrel either. I was like, if I'm going to do this, man, I'm going to try and do this at least somewhat right.
Anything in the reference series is, there's one level better, but I mean, that's right. That's awesome right there.
Yeah, I'm not that much of an audiophile or whatever it is. Yeah. I didn't cut my speaker wire exactly the same lengths either because
okay.
I mean, that seems we're little talk. Bit. That's
you're gonna have some draw there. Come on.
There is, but I don't think that the roughly 12-inch difference.
That's like at least 0.001 milliseconds right there, or something.
At least you didn't use the Radio Shack speaker wire, or did you?
No, I did not. I actually. And that's my next project. I actually got what is it? It's insulated wire so that you can put it inside walls. Yeah. Which I have not done. I have not done, of course, yet. But if anyone wants to volunteer, I don't know. I probably have $100,000 worth of remodeling down if anyone wants to volunteer. And
I got a sledgehammer. I'll come over. I'll help you out with the demo day.
See, the sledgehammer's not the problem. The problem is putting the drywall back up and finishing it. That's where the problem.
Well, you let me know. I got the texture gun and all the tools for that. So,
I'm good at demo. That's about it.
That's where I draw the line. I'm really good at knocking stuff down, putting things back up. Yeah.
Between the three of us in 24 hours, you could have nothing but studs, buddy.
Absolutely.
Come on down. Airline tickets are cheap. I'll buy you guys tickets down here. Come on down.
Yeah. We can non-rev now. The seats are wide open.
You can. I hear that the flights are open.
Go figure.
Just join another deadheading crew on the plane.
Well, you guys remind me of an email I read just this morning. And Rob, I don't know if you've seen this over on our Legacy Airlines app that we have. We got a message this morning indicating that revenue flights, as of April 17th at Legacy Airlines, we will now be authorized to position an aircraft under a revenue flight number without having flight attendants on board. Revenue cargo, mail, and bags are also authorized, but cannot be carried in the passenger cabin. And the dispatcher will add a note to the flight plan, which remarks that indicate that the flight is going to be operated under Part 121 with no flight attendants on board. And only company-employed deadheading crew members on the NS list or flight deck authorized personnel such as CAS or FDJ, FAA, or other LEOs can be in the cockpit jump seat. And those are the only ones that will be authorized to travel. So if you're non-revving, you're a company employee non-revving trying to get to work, you technically can't be on that flight because you either have to be in the cockpit jump seat if it's available, and if it's not available, you're not on the NS, which is the list of people that are operating on that flight, deadheading crew members and working crew members. So non-revving might be a challenge if you're listed on a 121 flight, a Part 121 flight with a flight number.
I wonder they really didn't address that in the email, but I wonder if that even shows up on JetNet, as a selectable flight, because some of the other extra segments flights show up on JetNet. They may not be clickable, but clickable to select and add, like a 9800 flight or something like that.
Right.
I've seen them on there, but anyway,
that's
interesting.
On our portal, I believe they do show up. And I think you might have to go into Res or whatever they call that system to get all the flights even the extra flights and the ferry flights and whatnot. So if it's not if it's a Part 91 flight, it won't show up in JetNet. It has to be scheduled. If it's a non-scheduled flight, that also will not show up in your travel planner. So if you're trying to commute, you're non-revving wherever you're going, or you're planning on going somewhere as a non-rev passenger, a lot of times the only thing that you have access to on our company's website is the DOT scheduled flights. And if there's a cancellation and then they add a flight that is an extra flight or a charter flight because of cancellations or weather, that won't show up. You have to go through some of the other portals that we have access to, at least.
It also brings up some other good news, like we talked about in episode 37 and a couple other ones, that we're doing a lot of cargo stuff. We're a lot of cargo flights, cargo, and I forgot what else they put, mail. So the planes are moving around without passengers, but below the deck, in the cargo compartments, they're full of mail and stuff that's going around the country.
Yep, for sure. So I see that both you gentlemen have a little bit of a shadow going on. How long are your beards getting now? What's going on there? The challenge has been accepted. I was telling Julie that I should put on a mask, one of those N95s, shave completely around it. Now that we're required to wear the mask at work at all times, and as a matter of fact, the LA World Airports organization that governs all of the airports in Southern California has put up a new restriction that any airport employee passing through Los Angeles must don a mask at all times while on property. So you can't take it off for any reason. So it's a requirement now. They'll cite you whatnot as an employee. So I was thinking, hey, just shave on the outside of the mask, leave the beard on the inside. Who would know, right?
Yeah, that's I don't know what to say, man. That's where we're headed. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I'll have a full-on Fu Manchu pretty soon. Oh man, if this goes on for much longer, man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to keep it together.
Start looking like Chewbacca here pretty soon. Be like, Chewie, what's going on?
Crap. Oh, yep.
I tried that for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And about 2 weeks ago, I couldn't do it anymore. I had not shaved for a couple weeks, and I just decided, I'm not going to do that anymore. I didn't really like it, to be honest with you. It was kind of getting annoying, and I was like, okay,
pain,
I'm not going. Yeah. And so I've adopted personal choice. Every 3 days I'm going to go ahead and shave, because it's just, otherwise it gets uncomfortable. And so you got to either make the choice whether you're going to do it or not do it. And I gotta probably shave in the next, either tonight or tomorrow morning before it starts bugging me again. Because it was pretty impressive there after a couple of weeks. That was definitely the longest I'd ever gone without shaving.
Well, the trick, Roger, is you got to use a lot of conditioner.
Is that what the trick is?
That's the trick.
That's right.
You got to shampoo and you got to condition. I've never gotten
far enough where I actually knew that was where you actually had to groom it.
You got to condition. I mean, otherwise it just itches. And
there's the whole product line.
Well, that was my problem.
Just for beards, so you can go out and get all this stuff just for beards. It's amazing the market that's out there for that kind of stuff.
Oh, for sure, especially now with all these. What do you call these young men? Not beatniks. What are they called?
Or something.
No, these new generation of hipsters. That's what it is. The hipster. They've got so much product, and they're I have some scruff
they gotta
stuff.
Stay away from a heat source, man. They'll go up like that.
Yeah. No, I'll shave it before my next trip, which surprisingly I did get in my April schedule. And it is much different than what I'm used to. Rob, you were telling me a little bit about yours. What's going on with these flight schedules?
Yeah, they're definitely not the same as we're accustomed to. I normally hold a fairly, I'm fairly junior, so I hold a line, and usually it's full of 3 and 4 day trips. And this month I got a hybrid line, which is a combination of reserve and regular line flying, for the people that are wondering what a hybrid line is. And then scattered throughout the month, I'm actually on reserve for the company. So, but the flights, the schedule that I have, I'm only doing weekend 2 day trips. I have 1 3 day trip in there, but the rest of the month is all 2 day trips.
You actually had a 3 day trip in your bid packet.
I have 1 3 day trip in my bid that I've been awarded in my bid pack, and I actually tried to bid for it. So I think that's why it gave me that trip. But I tried to bid for like 2 day trips and then 3 day trips, so on and so forth. So, but
so you prefer the 2 day trips?
Yeah, 2 day trips are great. I like having the three legs first day, and then the 1 leg home on the last day, and try to get home early, and try to be gone less than 24 hours and get your 10 to 15 hours of flying in. So
the benefits of living in base right there.
Yeah.
And Roger, when you were at ExpressJet, did they have the PBS system back then?
Nope.
You were doing the hard line bidding.
We were line bidding all the way through when I had left, and I know that there were plans to implement PBS at some point, but that was there was a whole lot of stuff going on, which is kind of what led to me leaving, and that was just one of them, along with a whole slew of other things. But I'm not actually sure. I mean, ExpressJet, as I understand it, is completely different company than it was when I left.
I'm surprised about 6 years ago now. Is still around. You know what I mean?
Well, I am too. I'm not even sure who. ExpressJet merged with ASA, who was owned by SkyWest. Does SkyWest even own ExpressJet anymore? Do you guys know?
I don't think so. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I don't think they do. I think that's something that changed maybe within the last year or so, or maybe even a year and a half. Because I do remember them being owned by SkyWest, but at some point I think SkyWest and ExpressJet split off again. So
I think SkyWest they had enough, but that was way after. This was 6 years ago now that I left. 5 years and 11 months now.
According to Wikipedia, I just looked it up here while we're talking. ExpressJet Airlines LLC is a North American regional airline headquartered in College Park, Georgia. It now flies under the United Express brand for United and is partially owned as a subsidiary of United Airlines. And it operates an all-jet fleet consisting exclusively of Embraer regional jets. And they had, at least before all this COVID stuff happened, they had bases in Chicago, Cleveland, Houston, Newark, and Knoxville, Tennessee. So yeah, it was established in 1986, started operating in 1987. So it's been around for a little while. It was acquired by Continental for a while. It branched out, did some wholly owned stuff, and now I guess it's partially owned by United Airlines. So
yeah, so it's a shell or completely different than what it was, because it used to be only an ERJ or the Embraer 145 fleet, and I guess they're only flying the 170s now. And then when ASA came around, it was CRJs, and now the CRJs are totally gone. The 145s are totally gone. They're flying only something completely different. So I don't know. Admittedly, like I say, I've been out of that for quite a while, but I know that they've gone through a bunch of stuff. But to your original question, though, we were always line bidding for when I was there.
Yeah. Well, the schedules have been kind of weird going on here at Legacy Airline, of course, because of all this. And the reason I ask about the PBS is kind of new to me over the past couple of years while I've been over here at Legacy. And it's been kind of weird to see the schedules basically dump, They, for LA on the Airbus, there was nothing more than a 2-day trip. And everything was 1 or 2 legs on the first day with I think the average that I saw was about a 14-hour to 15-hour layover. There were some 20, 21-hour layovers and some 10-hour layovers. I mean, it just depends. But I think we're on average about 15-hour layover, somewhere around there. But nothing was more than a 2-day trip. Not one sequence in there was more than a 2-day trip. And I actually kind of bid strategically to try to maximize my time to make up for the fact that I really haven't flown this month. Granted, I get my line guarantee and it's all good, but still, it's a lot of things that are out of the loop, like per diem and, just the little overage that we get every month that we kind of depend on to help pay the bills and the mortgage and whatnot. So I tried to maximize my time, and I ended up with a 72-hour line, all 2-day trips. They were all in my very first layer of my PBS bidding. Now, preferential bidding system is the computer software that a lot of airlines are using. Almost all of them are using this software nowadays because it does reduce the manpower necessary to process all of everyone's requests. And just kind of a recap for the listeners that may or may not understand how this PBS works. So pilots are in an industry where seniority is everything. And if you want to have a particular schedule, you bid for it, and it's completely based on your seniority. So the most senior person in the pilot group for that company would bid every month during a period of time, and they basically would get the pick of the litter. And there's hardline bidding where you have a list or a spreadsheet, and on that spreadsheet, there's line number 1, and line number 1 includes the trips that are in line number 1. And it goes on line 2, 3, all the way down to 300, 800, however many lines there are. Then at the bottom of that, there's a bulk of either reserve lines or standby lines or things like that, depending on the company. So the most junior person basically gets whatever's left, which is usually like the worst possible thing for their schedule. So that's hardline bidding. And PBS bidding is the computer goes in and goes, well, what does the first person want? The first person wants, this trip, that trip, these days off, this, starting time at this time. I don't care what you give me, but as long as I start after noon on Tuesdays, there's so many variables that you can personalize your bid preference. And the computer goes through, analyzes it, and tries to accommodate everyone on the list the best they can in seniority order. So as a PBS, there are a lot more variables. It's so much more complicated. And for the most part, it helps give everybody a little bit of what they want. And you bid layers. So at our company, we have 7 layers. So I bid a particular way. I have a method to my madness. And usually the first 5 layers are like my dream schedule. So my first layer.
Same here.
Yeah, I always put in like the best of the overnights and the best trips
Yeah,
possible.
the most unrealistic stuff that I think that I may never get, but that I want and I would love to have.
Right.
As if I was the number 1 pilot in the world, the only guy at the airline.
But that's exactly the way you have to think about that, Rob. Is that you're number 1 and this is what I want, and because sometimes it happens. And how does that relate to April? Well, in the April bidding packet that I programmed into PBS, my number 1 layer had basically the 2-day trips that started early in the morning because I don't have to worry about LA traffic right now, and did DCA overnights because my choices out of LA were DCA, Mexico City, Charlotte, a couple Florida locations, and some other, like Chicago and other locations like that. I took away all the hot cities, like anything on the East Coast or Florida. I just put those. I didn't want to go there because why go somewhere where there's a potential for higher risk? I took away all the deadheads. Why should I sit in the back of an airplane if I don't have to? And then I took away all the red eyes. Why would I fly a red eye if I don't have to? Let me try to keep a schedule that is within my circadian rhythm. And lo and behold, every single trip except for one was off my first layer. So it worked out pretty well for me. Now, mind you, I am not a senior pilot at Legacy Airlines. Yeah. I'm middle of the road in terms of bidding.
Yeah.
So
do you know your percentage? Do you know off the top of your head what your
last
percentage
I
is?
checked, it was 56.
That's a lot higher than I am.
For the bid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's higher than I am. I'm still at like 63% here in Dallas.
Yeah, in base I'm actually much lower. I'm like at 70 something percent. So, but on the Airbus as an FO, I'm actually sitting pretty good. And I think that's because there's a lot of leaves of absences that have been granted. That too was something that was issued in seniority order. So if you were a senior FO and you wanted a 3-month leave, paid leave, as we talked about in the last show, odds are you were probably going to get it. But if you're a junior FO, you weren't going to get it because, and that behooves the company as well, because they want to get all the people that are making a lot of money in terms of on the payroll with the highest years of service, highest money coming in, give them the leaves of absences, keep them at home, pay them 3/4 of what they normally get paid just to stay at home, because then all the cheaper employees, people lower on the pay scale, make them do the work. So
it makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you know, were there people that bid for leaves of absences that were not able to get them for staffing purposes?
Yes. I just spoke with a gentleman who we're going to have on the show here pretty soon on our next show. And he bid for a 6-month and a 3-month leave of absence and didn't get it. His seniority couldn't hold it. He could have held a 1-month leave of absence, but elected not to do that because he figured for 1 month, no big deal. So, and he's a Miami-based.
Part of me is just a little surprised that you guys, still have that many people that went on leaves of absences and still have enough flying to cover the people that that actually still wanted to go.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that, I hope that I'm sure that the company has looked at that to the nth degree. And I hope that it works out for everybody involved, including the company, because obviously the company is pretty important to a large amount of people too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the company needs to be around for a while, and because that's my paycheck, and if the company does well, I do well. And I've always been of that mindset, since before aviation in my previous career field. That's the way I was taught is, if the company does well, don't worry about the front door. The front door will open every day and it'll close every day at the same time. and just take care of your people, and your people will take care of the needs of the company. And if you're doing everything in the right order and taking care of your people first, then the company is going to get taken care of, which then will reward the customers, and the customers coming back will reward the shareholders. And so many times we see corporate America have that completely upside down, where they take care of the shareholders first and they take care of their employees last, because they figure, well, they're the low man on the totem pole, we can replace them. That's really not the way to operate a good business in the 21st century. So yeah, lots of rabbit holes we can go down on that one. So
Oh yeah, sure, for sure.
so your schedules have changed. At least Rob and our schedules have changed. And Roger, have you any updates on your flying? As of right now, are you still just sitting waiting for a call?
Still waiting, waiting for the call. However, like I had mentioned at the beginning of the show, there has been some rumblings that things are going to start picking up again. I don't have any exact dates, but like a lot of other news, it's kind of like it's getting to the point where people are starting to look ahead again. And I think that that's kind of where we are at. In the end, I do have a couple of pots that I have my hands in, and both of them have been making noise about, you know what, me working on the business side of aviation, if you will. That both of those parties have expressed the fact that, you know what, we're going to need to start moving again. We're going to need to start traveling again. I don't think either one of them really knows exactly what that's going to look like or when that might start happening. But I do suspect that within the next 30 to 45 days, I'm not going to have a blank slate in terms of my schedule, just because that's the nature of business, especially given, which is also good because given the fact that these people employ a fair amount of people. They have multiple businesses that employ many people, and we need them to get back to work. We need them to be able to restart the companies, to get people back to work, so that we can at least start getting back to some kind of semblance of normal, even though, I don't think that there's any question that that's not going to look like it did 2 months ago. But I think it's at least a step in the right direction. So I'm pretty heartened by that. And I do hope that, like I say, within the next 30 days, that at least some movement will start taking place.
Yeah.
Hey, Roger, I got a question for you. When it comes to currency, it just seems like you don't get to fly a lot for work, obviously, and I think that's, it could be a great balance if you could, if you could find the work-life balance there. But how do you handle currency in your job? I mean, obviously, you still have to keep up with the landings and all the fancy IFR stuff with the approaches and the holdings,
Right.
like that. And it just doesn't seem like there's enough opportunity. Maybe you just knock it all out when you go out for that, 1 or 2 flights that you have to do. But I don't know. How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. It's definitely different than the airline world and what you guys are accustomed to. You guys don't think about currency. It's built into your schedules. It's built into your training cycles. We do occasionally have to kind of at least be cognizant of it. In the end, we do right now is a completely different. It's something completely different. In the end, you talked about the landings. You got the 90 days. We're still nowhere close to that. I mean, our last flights, multiple flights, were just a month and a half ago. So we're still only at 45 days. We did just fly last week. We are need to go fly again to pick up the airplane, like we were talking about. And so from the currency standpoint, we do still do approaches, albeit much fewer than the airlines do. There's kind of that joke at the airlines about checking the weather. Why bother? We're going anyway. We don't have that. We do check the weather because the owners are sometimes interested in the weather, and different owners have differing levels of comfort, have different levels of the importance of where they're going. And in the end, we do shoot fewer approaches for that reason, just because if it's looking somewhat questionable, tomorrow's just as good as today. How about we go tomorrow when it's sunny and 75 instead of today when there's, thunderstorms rolling through, 80% chance of thunderstorms and tornadoes, for instance. But realistically, the currency does not. We don't run into any issues with that. We do fly. We do fly plenty. If you look at the hours, you guys have a large variance kind of depending on how many hours you want to fly. You guys are obviously capped at 1,000. I'd venture to guess you guys probably fly in the 700 to 800, depending per year, 700 to 800 hours. If there's a job out there that had to fly 700 to 800 hours a year in the line of work that I do, I would run so fast the other direction you wouldn't see me. We do 250 to 300 hours a year, but that's still plenty for currency standpoint. We're still gone about the same amount as you guys, and there's a large variance in corporate and private jobs as well. But typically, you're looking at 250 to 400 hours a year is a really busy account. But either way, from a currency standpoint, it's not going to become an issue.
Yeah. Well, all of this flight hours is actually
looking at my
kind of in jeopardy for us as well. I mean, it's only been 30 days, okay? Not even 30 days, but it will be 30 days for me. I would have to stay, everything would have to cancel in April and part of May in order for it to get worse for me, that I have to worry about currency. Rob, like Roger was saying, it's really not a major issue for us.
I'm sorry, guys. I lost connectivity here, so I missed out on the conversation after Roger ended with his thing. So I missed the question.
That's what he said.
Damn it, Bobby! What the hell's wrong with you?
No, we were saying that Roger. I was just kind of like adding on what Roger was saying. Roger was indicating that he doesn't have to worry too much about currency because even though they don't fly for 30, maybe even 60 days, eventually they will get that stuff in there, right? Am I understanding you right, Roger? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In the end, if I were to go back and look at my log, just for instance, we'll be gone usually between 11 and 14 days a month, and we'll fly on roughly about 2/3 of those days. So in the end, we're still flying approximately 8, 9, 10 days a month, because when we go out somewhere, oftentimes, we'll have a down day. Most of those days, to be honest, are one leg days. We do some that are two. I think I can count on one hand at the current job that I do, where I've been for a year and a half. Yeah, about a little over a year and a half now. I can count on one hand the days that I've flown more than two legs. Where I've flown, because it's never been more than that, because we just don't do it. But even then, from a landing standpoint, your currency is still well in hand.
Yeah. And to give some perspective to some of the online listeners, I just pulled up my flight time for the last 28 days, and in amidst this whole coronavirus COVID thing, I've flown 26 and a half hours in the last 28 days, which that's a month of flying, a whole month, and I usually do about 85 hours a month in 28 days. So I'm at 26, and then for the year, and these are all rolling numbers too. So the new 117 rules they're all rolling timeline. So 365 days, I've flown 647 hours in the last year. So
are you tired?
Man.
That sounds that sounds grueling.
Well, it is what it is. Actually, it's a lot better than what we were doing at a Sandpiper, I think. We did a lot of short, the short legs, 4 legs, 6 leg days, and some of the beginning times. It was just brutal, and you'd barely even get that kind of time, but you feel like you've worked 6 times as hard for the flight time. And now it's just, there's a lot of, Tony does a lot of, straight and level stuff for 4 hours at a time, doing those transcons and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of hours are chewed up just going straight and level, which is, good way to make your money if you're, besides from sitting at home and getting your whole schedule canceled. So
Where are you looking up your hours? What's the code for that?
I just looked at my monthly schedule, the HI1, and then up at the top, they have some of the part 117 stuff on there. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, flight time 672 hours, which is basically 28 hours for the month, and then 365 days.
Yeah, I'm at. What'd you say? I'm at 734.
734. Yeah. So
Yeah.
for 365 for the year.
Yeah.
So you're almost 100 hours more than I am. Actually, you're a little more. Yeah, a little less than 100 hours more than I am. So
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
I think that's about right. It sounds like from what we talked about before, I think you try to target about 85 hours a month, right?
Right.
Time. Yeah. So yeah, we're both in a ballpark. Same thing here.
Yeah.
So I did, fortunately, but I don't need to look very far to do my totals because it's just one page of my logbook, which I just happened to grab.
You have a
this
logbook?
year. I have a logbook.
Don't knock it, man.
Logbook, Tony?
Yeah, hell yeah, dude.
You do? Okay. I just use whatever
You never know what happens. I don't have the forever job you guys do, but I did just look it up. So this year of 2020, I have flown 71 hours. And in the past
71 hours this year.
I've flown 71 hours this year so far.
This is my
in the past
third book.
Month and a half, I've flown 52 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Roger.
That's awesome.
Roger, give me your wings. Give them to me.
I know. You call yourself a pilot?
I'll tell you what, that boy ain't right.
Dude, I got more time flying a kite than you do. Anyway.
Well, see, and that's one of the things when you guys talk about, when talking about flight times, flight times are a very different thing. I mean, you're talking about to get to 250 hours in an aircraft type, okay, so how many hours do you have in that type of airplane? I've got 200 hours, and people will turn their nose up with that. Well, that's a year of flying.
Yeah,
that's a solid year, and that's if you're flying the same, aircraft, the same airframe. I fly a couple different airframes, so I mean, it can take me 2 years to get to 200 hours.
75 days
in a specific type.
We do it in 75 days.
It's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
On the same token, I have a bunch of military friends that were F-16 pilots, and in the beginning when I was trying to build time and everything, and I'm like, hey man, I finally got 20 hours this month, and they're like, wow, that's pretty damn good. Those guys, they're lucky, if they put 80 hours a year.
Yeah,
in an in an F-16, and that's working it. That's humping it in the F-16. A lot of those guys, when you see a guy out there that has 2,000 hours in an F-16, and I'm sure a lot of that has changed because I've been kind of been detached from a lot of that stuff for years now. But if there was a pilot coming in with 2,000 hours in a Viper, that guy had high time. I mean, he'd been doing it for 20, 25 years, and that's amazing. So it's amazing the drastic differences between military, corporate like you, Roger, and airline guys. It's just it's all over the board.
The distinction really is with the fact that when you fly for an airline operator, what planning are you doing? You're doing no planning whatsoever. Someone else is doing that for you. You're just verifying the numbers with your flight release prior to every flight.
That's true.
And you have about 15 minutes to review a usually 20 to 25 page document that has all the NOTAMs and weather and MELs and things that have to do with fuel burn and winds aloft. And so you're really just glancing over it to making sure that it all looks good, and you're going to have the appropriate amount of routing and fuel for your current flight. But as a private operator or a corporate operator or a military operator, you're spending so much time in the planning phase of each sortie or flight op or what have you, that really that time is not calculated in a logbook somewhere, but that's really where the difference is, I think, is that you're spending so much more time planning because you're solely responsible in many cases for that. And, and in the military, you're training, you're going through your sortie scenarios, and, so that time is you can't really compare apples to apples. Basically, it's not. They're apples to oranges for sure. So yeah,
totally agree.
There's I
because
think
you've got jobs that necessarily a lot of the airline job is just flying the airplane. In the corporate world, there's a lot of your time that's spent is, like you were just talking about, is actually in the planning phase, and there's other stuff outside of even flying that you're responsible for, because those passengers, you guys get the passengers on the airplane, and then you usher the passengers off the airplane, and that's the end of it. We've got transportation, lodging. There's a lot of different stuff that goes in actually with what we do, other than just actually operating the aircraft as well.
Speaking of the passengers getting ushered off, Tony, how weird is it for you to park, set the parking brake at the gate at the end of a flight, and run your shutdown checklist or whatever you call it, and then turn around and the passengers and the flight attendants are already off the airplane?
Yeah,
because there's not enough
town.
Passengers on the airplane.
Reminds me
usually
when I was
it takes like 20 minutes for them to get off.
Right.
Exactly.
That's just kind of the way it's going to be for a little while. Hopefully that, as these technology and the medical field is starting to have great potential for us to get back to work with these tests that are potentially going to test the antibodies and whatnot. And so that's going to make a huge difference. I think the next 30 days is going to be really interesting to keep an eye out for, not just the aviation industry, but for the whole scope of what the world is going through to get back to work. Because, okay, we've had our fun playing PlayStation and Xbox and Wii and whatnot at home, and now it's time to start earning the money, because unemployment rates, the government can't sustain these unemployment rates for a long period of time. So we're gonna have to get back to work, really, and the new normal. And we're not going to really talk about COVID on this particular show today, but there's a lot of interesting things happening around the world, including I was seeing over in the Netherlands that they've decided not to do any kind of lockdown whatsoever and just do like a mass public, like everybody gets it, and then there's going to be a mass immunity because
really
they all have the antibodies. So I'm interested to see. Everybody's kind of watching to see what's going on there. But so let's, I hate to say let's start off the show because we're 50 minutes into it, but on this show, we wanted to talk about good news. I'm inspired by some of these new videos that are out there on YouTube, and I want to talk a little bit of good news. And I came across this article last night as I was doing a little bit of research for the show, and I just wanted to touch base with you guys to see what your thoughts are. That the LAX at Home is a new program that connects the airport, the community, as Angelinos and the others in the community throughout California. And the way they're doing that is by giving them access to some of the programs that are existing at the airport. And in a press release from the LAWA.org, or the Los Angeles World Airports, that was released yesterday, it says here, since most people are staying at home, we are bringing LAX into their homes with a variety of engaging educational and fun activities and content that capture the spirit of LAX during a time when most people can't physically visit the airport. From virtual tours of our award-winning art program to video visits with our Pets Unstressing Passengers, or PUPS program, to games and coloring activities, there is something for everyone. And I got to tell you guys, I went through the website. It was a little difficult to find, and I'll have some links in the show notes, but some of those coloring pages are pretty badass, man. I'm going to print some out and bust out some coloring tonight. They've got some really cool detailed. It's not like they have some simple ones for the kiddos, but they have some coloring pages there that are pretty damn intricate. So definitely worth checking it out. All the LAX volunteers are safer staying at home, and the LAX PUPS Canine team are no exception. The LAX PUPS at Home videos are available on their Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube platforms, and new content is being added weekly. Just search LAX PUPS. Also, a new video series called LAX Art at Home interviews some of the newest artists at LAX and gives viewers a deeper look at the process and meaning behind the art that is now on display inside of LAX terminals. An LA-based artist, Luciana Abbat, is the first to appear in this occasional series and talks about her mixed media exhibit. A Letter to the Future is what it's called, and it's currently available on view in Terminal 7 until fall of 2020. Again, I'll have a link in the show notes. Looking for fun activities at home? This is what I was talking about. LAX is now offering a variety of downloadable airport-themed coloring pages. The options include the iconic theme building and forthcoming automated people mover, a commercial aircraft, and a famous LAX pylons. Interesting in testing your brain skills, LAX has a variety of puzzles and word searches as well. There are options there for travelers of all ages and skill levels. So that's pretty cool that an airport would bring this out to the public via either social media or online forum so that people can still be engaged with LAX. Do you guys know of any programs in your area?
No.
What?
What?
Well,
Did you say programs in my area?
Yeah, there's there's a lot of things going on social media that I kind of just skimmed through, but yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to reinvent the way they connect with with their customers and the public and towns and everything like that, and staying connected. There's been a lot of I think I mentioned this before, but I've seen a lot more of it going on, especially with the proms. The students that are being neglected their senior prom and everything like that. So there's been a lot of like social media where they have they'll ask via social media their friends out to the prom, and I think that's really, really nice. And a lot of drive-by happy birthday things going on where they'll set up a little table on the street, have a cake, and all their friends would drive by in their cars honking the horns and yelling out happy birthday for 10-15 minutes. And since you can't gather, it's okay to do a drive-by, so they've been doing that. So I think that a lot of that stuff's been going on. That's really nice to see.
Yeah.
And I can't say, I mean, a whole lot of stuff that's going on in my neck of the woods either. To be honest, a lot of my time's been refamiliarizing myself with school material and how to be a teacher and how to have kids home a lot, and kind of learning about the online classroom aspect. And a lot of stuff that I've been doing has to do with the kids in the school. I mean, to be honest with you, I got back last week. I'm not sure if I've actually driven a car anywhere in the last 9 days. Just
getting about 1 month to the gallon on the car now.
But yeah,
well,
especially considering the fact that I've got an electric car, which is so now things are really kind of screwy.
You might need to go charge the battery.
I know. Well, and the car's being used. I mean, part of it is just because of the way that our home situation is. She is the one that's been going out for the things that we need. I mean, she's been going out every other day or so.
Yeah.
People are different. She's much more. She needs that escape much more than I do, and so I'm willing to let her go and do that. But I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't had a whole lot of social interaction at all outside of YouTube, loosely used gentleman term here. But it's a totally brand new thing for a whole lot of people, and like I said, I have hardly had any. Now that I'm actually thinking about it, I've hardly had any social interaction over the course of this whole thing.
Well, you got us, buddy.
I know.
And if you really want to get crazy, you can go out and start some havoc. Oh. But hey, this has really been a challenge, is to the struggle of isolation. And so many Americans, I watched the funniest meme or TikTok or whatever the heck it was. I don't know. I don't have TikTok, so it was like on social media of some kind. And it was a guy, and he's like, oh, this is going to be 6 years from now in first grade. And here's the teacher calling roll call. And he's reading off a list of names of all the kids. And the names are Coronita, Covidia, no, Isolationa, No, and it's nonstop. It's like Pandemica. No, it's so funny, and it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Man.
So
Yeah,
getting into pediatrics right now in the next 9 months, Roger. I'm telling you, get into pediatrics.
I do wonder about what it's like to be to be pregnant or about to have a kid in today's environment. I mean, is it scary? Is it worrisome? I kind of just wonder about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're going to go down and COVIDia, hey, going to have a whole new different meaning after this.
Yeah, that's a nice name.
COVIDia. Oh.
Oh shit. So
that's hilarious.
In some other news, or just real briefly, we got to throw at least something in there. Aviation, a little bit more aviation related here. Came across this article that was released this morning, and we're gonna spin it as some good news, but if you read the whole thing, and I'll put a link in the show notes. This is an article from Inc.com by Chris. Forgive me, Matskazinsk. That's the best job I could do. I'm sorry. So Chris Matkazinsk, he indicates that Southwest promises not to furlough anyone. But is this really good news? And again, I'll put the link in the show notes. The airline's CEO, Gary Kelly, spoke to his employees via a video conference and made this courageous pronouncement. "We will not be downsizing the airline," he said. That's quite a bold statement in circumstances that are so uncertain. How can he possibly say that? Kelly admitted he's preparing for a number of scenarios. However, he believes Southwest is oddly well placed to avoid shrinkage.
That's what she said.
He said, "We need to be prepared for a very prolonged, sluggish travel environment. And that's where having plenty of cash, low debt, and a low cost structure and low fare brands becomes so important." But then the caveat emerged. If this is the real recession and a bad recession, it could take 4 to 5 years for passengers to return. So it was revealed that the company has turned to its flight attendants, pilots, mechanics, and other employees and asked for concessions. Let me say that again. They asked for concessions. The union appeared reluctant, understandably fearing temporary concessions may become permanent. Anybody at Legacy Airlines can tell you that's always the fact. Southwest has never laid off staff, and it never furloughed them either. Yes, in its history, it has never laid off staff or furloughed. Clearly, Kelly's motivation was to reassure its employees. It's understandable in a company that very much focuses on its people. And that could be a good thing if the economy bounces back a little bit better than we're projecting, and depending on some of these, deathly negative articles that we are, reading here on a daily basis, which I've tried to reduce over the last 10 days. But it also, if it has to come to reduction in pay in order to not furlough, that could set us back quite a bit. And whatever the world's, or I should say the country's largest airline right now is Southwest. They have the most flights in the country. They beat out Legacy Airlines and Acme and some of the others by quite a bit because they have continuously...
Well, and I think that's kind of a key to that article is that the fact that they're the biggest within the continental United States is going to help them immensely, because I think what's going to be a lot slower to come back is the big money makers for the legacy airlines, which is the actual international. And they use those legacy airlines, the big three, if you will, typically use the domestic in order to funnel towards the international, which is where a lot of that money is made for them. And Southwest, somewhat famously has stayed away for the most part from the international. They do some now with the AirTran merger, but everybody knows them as the domestic carrier. And so I think that does uniquely position them to be a little bit better off than a lot of the airlines. I think that, like you were just saying, I think that a lot of that is to reassure the employees. You can go down that whole road with the concessions and whether what he said is true or not. I do believe that his goal is certainly not to have to furlough anybody, especially because that's kind of woven into the fabric of their DNA, having not done it so far. But in the end, a lot of it is going to be dictated by how this is going to turn around. I do not think, just guessing about the general public, I don't know if it's going to take as long as they're fearing for travel to come back. I still think that just kind of looking at people around or hearing people talk now, people are anxious to get back to a quote unquote normal. They want to go back to what they see as a normal life, and what people, the general public, sees as a normal life is not necessarily going to be sitting on the sidelines and keeping 18 feet away from each other for another 5 years. It's not going to be quick. I don't think. I was kind of hoping before that it would be. I do not think it's going to be necessarily quick, but I also do not think it's going to be 4 or 5 years. I would think probably within 1 or 2. People want to get back. They're going to want to go see grandma. They're going to want to go see some other place in the country, because we have always, or the people that are around now, we've always had the ability to do that. And when they're able, I think that people will probably start to do that. And I do think that Southwest will be better positioned in order to provide that to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, Roger. And echoing on what you just said, I think Gary Kelly, I think he has to make those comments to his troops, because that just sets the mindset for his employees and everything that, hey, we're going to be okay. And you guys just keep doing what you're doing. We're not going to lay you off. We're not going to, furlough you in any way. Posturing, I guess. You know what I mean? That's probably a good way to say it. Just
it is
basically pump up your team and let's say, hey, we're going to be here. We're going to be ready to go. And like you said, I think people are ready to go. People are ready to get out. I mean, you just look around my town here, and there's been a noticeable uptick in,
people that are out.
Yeah, people driving around.
It's the same thing here within the last week or two.
They're ready to go. And I know that Texas is going to be one of the first states to kind of open up. I think a lot of states are kind of looking at that anyway, but we're ready to go. I think traveling is going to be one of the first things that happens because it's part of the essential business stuff. As a matter of fact, I mentioned it over and over again in all the other episodes. My kids play volleyball, and they just rescheduled 4 of their tournaments for the next month. So there's thousands of kids ready to go to, Orlando, St. Louis. Actually, I don't think St. Louis is going to happen, but Orlando, there's Austin, and these, they're ready to go. So as soon as there's a green light, I know there's going to be a lot of people traveling, whether it be Southwest, American, Delta, or any of the other airlines, even corporate stuff. They're going to be ready to go.
I think this summer is going to bounce back. Honestly, I think that people are going to want to get out and go on vacation with these $13 overnights. Vacation. They'll go, I'll just wear a mask.
The hotels are ready to go. Yeah. The restaurants are ready to go. I think it's going to be, obviously everything's unpredictable. So whatever I'm saying here, obviously could be completely off. I'm totally uneducated and stupid about this whole thing, but it's caught everybody off guard anyway. So whatever I say, it's just as educated of a guess as most of the other people, unless they're data driven and everything like that. But just think about it. It's going to be like a huge siphon effect. It's going to be like a huge tidal wave. Once things go, it's going to go fast. It's going to pick up quickly. I think you're going to have a couple of touchy-feelies. Let's see what happens here or then. But within like a week or two, it's just going to accelerate to a point where they're going to be like,
we're off to the races, buddy.
We need to hire more people. Yeah. Yep. So
then people are stir crazy. They want to get out.
Yeah, they want to get out. They want to spend money. They want to go out and see the world, see the country. I think it's going to happen.
Get back to There, what normal?
I think we're going to have a slow progression this summer, and we're going to start to see it ramp up. And then really when the big normalcy is going to happen is the school year. So as soon as school is back in session and these parents are going to be like, the kids are out of the house. Let's party. That's going to be the norm.
Yeah. What I think you're going to see too is there's going to be a lot of rules set in place for social distancing when things do open up. You can't pack, a restaurant full of people. You can't pack a plane full of people. You're going to have to allow a certain distance between seats and stuff like that. But I think that's not going to last very long. I think there's going to be a point where they're going to be like, people are going to be like, we need more capacity, we need more seats, and they're going to start pushing for, putting pressure on whoever's making these rules, these legislators and just say, hey, we need to back off on this and get back to normal. We can't let this run our lives anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what if we go back? I mean, this is just a theory, but what if as we ramp back up, the airlines decide, we're going to bring in the interiors from the 1970s of these airplanes. So instead of crowding 170 people in the back of this jet, let's put 150 people in the back of this jet. Just have a little bit wider seats, a little bit more leg room, a little more separation. And with the updated cleaning processes, the air filtration systems, the technology that's out there, people wearing masks. And I just read that Canada is now requiring that all passengers wear a mask in order to be on the aircraft. They can't be on the aircraft without a mask. So, I know that these kind of things by state are out there. If you're out in public, you have to wear a mask. I know in California, you can't even walk into an establishment unless you have a face covering on. And the other day I saw a kid, she was like this, and she walked in the store, and I guess that counts, that counts, but then how are you going to pick up this? I mean, I don't know, whatever. So, so we might see some changes, but can you imagine if the interiors, and they charge just a little bit more in terms of price, because they have to make up the cost. So instead of squeezing everybody in like a sardine in a can, maybe we go back to a little bit of that civility that we had in aviation back in the 70s.
I don't really know if they're going to want to outlay the capital in order to change the interiors when the whole goal of those airlines is they've got a lot of ground to make up in terms of it's financial related. Now they've got the loan, or at least a partial loan to the government to repay, and to pay for the changing the interiors. I don't know if they're going to really want to go that far. I just hope that things do kind of start picking up. I think the big question mark is if, especially as we get back into fall and winter, if it comes back and we kind of have another wave, I think is going to be a big, that could put a pretty big damper on things. But I still maintain people are stir crazy. Like I've seen, and Rob mentioned, if you just look in the last week or two, there's been a noticeable increase in the amount of cars and people that I have seen in the neighborhood. And I think that's only going, the longer this goes on, the only more that's going to increase. So,
yeah, I think a lot of more people are now also taking the risk of just violating whatever city ordinances are in place, because, the chances of law enforcement enforcing the actual, code is very rare and slim. I mean, obviously there's people doing it, I'm not saying you should go out and break the law either. But I just think that more people are willing to just go out there and take their safety into their own hands and go out and just live their life. That's where I think we're getting to right now.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are just burned out. They're just burned out from staying at home. They're burned out from being indoors. And, we're a social society. So, I know I'm burned out. And with all this COVID stuff that's going on, it's affected so many aspects of our lives. I just couldn't bring myself to continue to do things like pay for cable service. I mean, I'm not even watching the TV. All I'm doing is Netflix, streaming, Apple TV, and and if anybody wants to get an idea of what society is going to be like in the next 10 years, just download, watch, or rent or whatever the movie Idiocracy. Because that is where we're heading, ladies and gentlemen. We already got the clown in the White House.
Idiocracy, that's great.
Idiocracy, great film. It's Luke Wilson, Maya Rudolph, came out years ago. It's a kind of a cheesy film, but it speaks volumes to the direction society, at least in a theoretical standpoint, is going.
Yeah.
And man, are we really falling into that category?
And a good way to tie this whole thing into aviation is I really enjoy, and you could do it with I guess the cable providers too, but it just seems so much more easier to bring everything with you on the road and just watch it on your iPad now.
Oh yeah,
because I can watch my YouTube TV, Netflix, obviously, and Amazon Prime, all that stuff, and possibly my Hulu stuff, but I don't even do much on Hulu anyway. It's awesome because if you have like a 2-hour sit during a turn at your wherever airport you're at, or Roger, you're kind of waiting for your flight to kick off or anything, and you have some downtime, you can just plug in your headphones or Bluetooth and catch up on that series that you've been wanting to watch. And it's really awesome. Before you didn't have that, you kind of stuck to whatever's on cable at the hotel. And how many times have you turned on the TV at the hotel and you're like, oh, I wanted to watch this one show on HBO or Showtime, and you go to that one particular channel and that's the only channel that's gone, that doesn't work, and you're like, come on.
You don't pay for that. Your company didn't pay for that.
It's right, really cool for those sits to be able to just turn whatever you want on and pick up where you've left off.
Absolutely.
And one reason I actually Marriott hotels, not all of them, but allow you to cast what you're doing.
I like it.
Onto their TVs or their TVs or smart TVs, and those Marriott, you can watch it on the normal TV.
You don't have to touch that hotel remote at all. You can use your phone.
I don't remember the last time I actually watched an actual hotel cable.
Yeah. Why would you?
Because everything's just on the little iPad.
You know what?
I rarely turn it on.
The turning point for me, the factor that is most critical in my decision to get rid of TV and not watch TV shows, at least in a live setting, are the commercials. Okay. I cannot stand the max volume commercials that interrupt your show every 15 minutes. I'd rather stream it, and sometimes some of this streaming, there are commercials in there, but big deal, you turn the volume down with a button or push mute on your headphones, whatever, and you get through it. But yeah, the commercials, they kill me. And now I've got so spoiled, even with podcasts, I can't even stand radio in the car anymore. I can't stand the commercials. 2 songs commercials, and the commercials last longer than the songs. So why the hell do I even listen to the radio anymore?
It drives me nuts. And they're the same commercials over and over and over again too.
Well, up next, real quick, let's move into this next segment I'm really excited about. And it's called Remember When it was not required to wear a face mask in public? Remember when we flew schedules that were exhausting with little rest between 4 and 5 and even 6-day trips? Remember when you could get hired at a regional and bring home close to $80K the first year of total compensation with all those bonuses that they had? Remember when? How about going back even farther? When we were barely clearing 20 or 25K a year on reserve, living out of our mobile homes, which are our suitcases, right? In crash pads and top bunks with 6 other dudes in a room that smelled like shit, and the whole apartment was just like ridiculously dirty. Remember when, how about that flight training? Sitting in your first fixed-wing aircraft with your instructor, looking at all those weird gauges in front of you, impressed by the guy or gal sitting next to you who may have only been like a few years older than you? Let's go back. Let's go way back. And let's talk about a few sessions that we remember from our past to help give perspective to those young aviators that are just now in flight training or thinking about going to flight training. I want to talk about a few events that have made a big impact to our aviation careers. Now, I can remember a story that kind of changed my perspective dramatically. I was going to a flight school over at Deer Valley in North Phoenix. And I was at the time it was called Pan Am Flight Academy. Is one of these pilot farms that you would go in and you have to wear the uniform with the bars and the stripes and whatnot. And it was a great school. It was very, very expensive at the time, but I really did get a quality education from them. And on one of my time building flights, I had to fly from Deer Valley over to I think it was Blythe or Show Low or something like that, and back as a way to build my cross country flight time. And it was a Sunday morning. And the flight plan that I had written out and had approved by one of the officers that were in what we call dispatch, or basically flight instructors sitting at a desk that would put their initials on your flight plan to make sure that, okay, you got enough fuel for this. This looks good. The weather's good. You can go. And that's how we would do our time building. And here I was flying, I think it was about 4,500 feet and going westbound VFR. And as I left the Deer Valley airspace, I tried to pick up flight following from Luke Air Force Base. But Luke Air Force Base was closed because it was Sunday. So I got on with the Phoenix Air Traffic Control and asked them if they knew the status of Luke Air Force Base and were they open and available for flight following. And they said, no, once you pass Gila Bend, contact Albuquerque Center and request flight following with them. And I thought, okay, well, that's good. And my flight instructor at the time said, while you're on these cross-country flights, use that time to your advantage. While you make sure you know where you are, you're doing all the pilotage stuff, aviate, navigate, communicate. But once all that's completed, you're putzing along at 110 knots. You might as well play around with the GPS system. We had a Garmin, I think it was a 530, was a color screen. And he says, this is the time where you can kind of start putting in waypoints and start learning how to use it because you're in the airplane anyway, right? So I had my head down and I'm plugging away and putting in my destination, the waypoints for my flight plan. And something in my head told me, wait a minute, your head's down. Who's looking out? Get flight following at minimum. Have that layer. So I wasn't even over Gila Bend. I had not even crossed it yet. And I decided to reach out to Albuquerque Center and try to get flight following. And they said, well, we're not picking you up. Can you climb? I said, sure. So I climbed up to 6,500 feet. And they said, okay, yeah, radar contact, squawk this number, and you're cleared as you're requested for flight following. Not 60 seconds goes by. And I hear November, 234 Papa Alpha, we have traffic at your 6 o'clock position. Same altitude. Your targets will merge. Suggest immediate climb or descent. And I was heads down looking at the Garmin and kind of glancing up every once in a while. And I went, I'm sorry, say again? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Traffic less than a mile. Your 6 o'clock. Your targets will merge. Suggest immediate climb. I said, I'm climbing. Full throttle, pull back on the stick. And as I'm climbing up, I hadn't even reached 7,000 feet yet. And here comes, from around my 6:30, 7 o'clock position, kind of the same direction, another Piper underneath me. Didn't move, didn't rock its wings, didn't flinch. Whoever was in that aircraft made absolutely no adjustments to their flight path. And our targets would have absolutely merged. I became white as a ghost. And I was shaking. And ATC says, okay, do you see him? Do you see him? And I lowered a wing and I could see him pass under me. And I said, yes, it looks like some kind of Archer or an Arrow or something, green paint, white airframe. And it looks like I'm clear of them. Okay, you can continue back down to 6,500 at your discretion. I'm going to stay here for a little while before I go down. Like, okay, that's fine. And I caught my breath. My eyes never went back into that GPS, not one time for the rest of that flight. I was, just an amazing event, scared the crap out of me. And if I hadn't called air traffic controlled prior to the fix that they told me or suggested that I reach out for flight following, and I didn't have them looking out for me, that could have been the end of it. That could have been the end of me. And I really learned something about always the importance of aviating first, the importance of having multiple layers of safety, the importance of listening to that little voice in the back of your head that says, something ain't right. And that really shaped early on in my career progression. That shaped how I still operate to this day. And Roger, you've got an extensive flight instruction background. We flew together as flight instructors. Do you have any kind of stories that really shaped the way you operate today that are rooted in your primary teachings and learnings?
I've been fairly fortunate that I haven't had any, gross stories like that. In an earlier episode way back, I had my big incident, if you will, going to Sholo, actually. But from an instructional standpoint, I mean, there were things that definitely did happen. I think one of the bigger ones that did change some of the way was when I was an instructor and actually in multi-engine instructing. I was younger. I went into flight instruction right after college. And I think that there's a lot of things that just when you're younger, everybody thinks that they're somewhat invincible. And I think that definitely played into it for me. I didn't necessarily know. You'd never flown a turbine-powered airplane. That a piston-powered airplane was the only airplane you knew. And so you didn't recognize some of their limitations as much. And this particular incident happened when I was flight instructing and I was doing multi-engine instruction, actually with another instructor in the airplane. And part of multi-engine instruction is single engine operations. And, I thought it would be good awareness practice what it would be like to actually shut down an engine in flight, which I had done done to me before. I had never actually done it, except in the particular airplane that I was in. You really, if you're going to do that, should have shut down one engine, and I had him shut down the other side. And the reason that we tried to shut down only one of them is because it was really hard to get the one restarted. And sure enough, that actually did happen for a while. Eventually we did get the engine restarted, but we were flying around for a while, kind of looking at each other like, well, this might not have been the smartest plan. And to this day, I have not shut down in a piston powered airplane. I have not shut down and actually a for real engine shutdown in flight. And again, that was not on an approach. It wasn't like we were, this was going to be cruise altitude only. No one should ever shut down an engine for you for real in a piston powered airplane when you are actually on an instrument approach. And I'm not advocating that nor saying that that's an okay thing. This was just in cruise flight to see what it was like. I just want to put that caveat in there. But I learned from that, maybe shutting down a piston powered airplane in flight in a multi-engine obviously is not the best plan. Now I do it, as probably most listeners know from my intro, I do a fair amount of King Air instruction. I do shut down engines in the King Air. I have not one time in my entire life flying, a couple thousand hours in King Airs, 5 legs a day sometimes. So I've never had a King Air engine fail to start on me, a PT6 engine fail to start, whether that's on the ground or in flight. But I do remember that incident flying around over in the Phoenix area and all of a sudden looking around going, well, this is kind of one of those things that they tell us we don't ever want to do is land a piston powered multi-engine airplane with one engine. And it would have been my own fault because I pulled the mixture control and I shut it down voluntarily.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that, that shaped me in terms of an incident.
Yeah. Just to keep the show, as you were saying, you were going to Sholo. I remember your incident, and I believe you told me about that soon after that happened. I can remember that story. But in the story I was telling, actually, I was going to Blythe. I was going westbound to Blythe. You were Sholo's.
Well, I wasn't about to tell you that was going to be a serious time building trip if you were going to Sholo and you were headed west.
You gotta correct me, man.
But hey,
you'll
eventually get there, but it'll take
go west, young man.
We got to keep our accuracy rate at least 50% here, otherwise it's all just going to go to shit, man. So yeah, absolutely. No, it was Gila Bend, and I think it was Buckeye VOR. I don't know. It was one of those VORs. But yeah, it's so long ago. But yeah, it's an amazing, shutting down an engine, and then for training purposes or otherwise, and then having a difficult time getting it running again absolutely can raise all the hairs on the back of your neck for sure.
And it did, for sure.
Yeah.
Rob? I've got a good one kind of along the same lines. I was just trying to build multi-engine time. So I'd already been a MEI, CFII, and all that other double I stuff out there at our previous flight school, and instructor out there. And I was trying to build time in 4-4 Tango. I think everybody's probably flown that thing once or twice at that Seneca.
The truck.
That was at the truck. Yeah, 4-4 truck. Yep. Have you flown that, Roger?
That sounds remarkably similar to the airplane that I was just referring to.
Yeah,
I think there was a 4. I don't remember what it was, but there was a Tango in it, and it was a Seneca.
It was a Seneca 1.
It was Seneca 1, barely airworthy. So yeah, that was the plane that I needed like I think I needed like 10 more hours to have the bare minimums for putting in my apps at all the airlines and stuff like that. So I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna bite the bullet. I'm gonna pay for the flight time. I'm just gonna go up and fly this airplane around. So after work, hopped in the plane, and I think I think the plane only had like a half a tank, maybe even a quarter tank of gas in it. So just enough for what I was gonna do. I was just gonna hop in the airplane, fly down to like Marana, Pinal, make it across country, because that was right at the the like within a mile of being beyond the the cross country 50 miles nautical mile thing, and then fly back. So flown that airplane hundreds of times already. I already have like 80 hours, 90 hours in it or whatever. And so I did the pre-flight, and the fuel selectors, I forget how it was, but there were sliders, right between the seats. Remember that?
Yeah.
So it was off, cross feed, and on, or something like that. So that's one of the checks. You cross feed whatever and make sure that it's cross feeding to the other.
Left,
tank,
right,
whatever.
both, or something like that.
Yeah, there's something like that, right? So anyway, so did all that, took off, flew cross country, landed in Marana. Actually, I didn't go to Marana. I went to the other one. What's the one just south of that? Ryan Field, I think it was.
Yeah, Ryan.
Pinal?
South of Pinal.
Pinal. It was right just south of Pinal.
Next to Tucson, just west of Tucson is Ryan Field.
Down at Ryan.
That's where they
so
had
Ryan Field.
they had a good restaurant there that had a prickly pear jelly, I remember.
So that's what it was. I got out, went to the bathroom, got a little quick sandwich, and then blast off to go back to Chandler. Well, did my quick run up check, rent 1,700 magnetos, blah blah. Did the fuel thing, and I quickly got off the ground, flying straight and level, eating my sandwich, and all of a sudden the right engine goes and just stops.
Oh.
So I'm like, oh my God, a lot of left rudder, mixture prop throttles, make sure the flaps up, gear up, check the mags, and I go down to the fuel selector, and I realize I left the right engine fuel selector in actually the left engine fuel select. I forget how it was. One of the engines was in crossfeed. Actually, they were both feeding off the same tank for a majority of the flight. So when I went back to both, the one engine was sucking from the lower tank, and that one went dry first, and that's the one that died. And I was like, ooh, holy crap! So cross feed, got the engine started, looked at the tank, the fuel tank, and I was like, barely, I was on fumes on that last tank. So I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna climb up, set the best power for cruise and best glide power, and I'm just gonna putt it back to a Chandler. Landed. That was my oh shit moment, basically, for me, because that thing shut down totally unexpectedly. And so obviously I learned a couple things. Was first of all, don't rush your checklists. Make sure you do it's read, do, and verify everything. So cross feed to on. And so make sure you use cross feed on, look down, you point at it. I do this today. I point at the thing, And I say on, and I look, does it say on?
Yep.
So, it's stupid to make those kind of mistakes, but sometimes you have to do it to learn from it. And so
Yep.
that was my one time, oh shit moment. Here we are in a multi-engine, and all kind of like you, all by myself. It could end, if it happened on takeoff or something like that, that would have sucked.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And to this day, and for similar instances, I say it, I point at it, I manipulate it, and I verify.
Yeah.
And I
verify.
I can't tell you how many times I'm in an Airbus A320, 180 plus people in the back. Captain says, gear up. I say, gear up. I point at the gear. Captains usually look at me like, what's he doing?
Yeah.
Then I move the gear handle.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I say, gear up. And
I know.
Why are you doing that?
Wrong gear, wrong.
Because now when you ask for flaps, I'm not going to reach over and grab something else, because that goes with everything, Flaps 1. I say, look at it.
Remember when we were flying the 145 and we used to take off with the APU feeding the packs?
Oh yeah, bars open.
You remember when we first started flying the airplane?
Sure.
APU feeding the packs, and then when you're in airborne, you reconfigure the packs, and then you reach up and you hit the APU shut-off button and shut down the APU. Well, what's the next button that's just above that? Isn't that the fire detection test button?
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yeah.
All the bells and whistles.
That's how you wake up the captain when they're asleep.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. So here we are. We're taking off out of Dallas, and it's a night flight, and we have the APU on with the APU bleed feeding the packs, take off, get the gear up, the flap right after takeoff checklist. So I reconfigure the packs and just reach up, and I just push the button up there and not, paying attention to what I'm pushing. I hit the APU fire detection test button. So everything lights up red, bells and whistles go off. Oh my God. The captain jumped out of his seat. He had a virtual heart attack for that moment. And I would have too, because that's totally unexpected, right?
Yeah.
And oh my God. And I was like, oops, sorry, wrong button.
My bad.
I reached up, cancel the warnings and all that, and I reach up and I shut down the APU, and I'm like, well, I'll never make that mistake again. Yeah,
that's
man.
Lessons learned. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yep.
I had a student.
In the 737, they have I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but real quick, it's the 737 is kind of unique in the way that it's poor man's ICAS system. All the lights are all over the place. So whenever you manipulate, let's say the crossfeed valve, you go from off the crossfeed or whatever. It has a blue light in the above the knob. So whenever you move the knob, it has two levels of illumination for that blue light. And whenever it goes bright blue, that means the knob is the valve is in transit. And then when it goes from bright blue to dark blue or not as bright, that means the valve is in its correct position.
All right.
So every time you touch something and you move it, you kind of have to sit there, select, watch, and verify it goes where it's supposed to go, and then you can release it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same along the same lines of, point, verify that you're going to do it, make sure you get the result that you're looking for, and then you can let it go. You have to do that all the time in the 737, because if not, you're going to put a switch or a valve in the improper or in the proper position, but it may not go where it's supposed to go.
Right.
And you won't know about it because you're not going to get a light or anything else other than the thing going, hey, up here, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. So
yeah,
in a lot of cases, you'll get a caution light on the dashboard, but that's about it.
Yeah. In my days of giving IOE, being a check airman for the regional airline, I did for many years and absolutely enjoyed it. I know, Rob, you did that too for a long time. I always would have occasionally one of those, I call them students, but they're employees that going through their initial training, that I was like, man, slow down. Slow down, because they were nervous and they wanted to do well and they wanted to show that they could do. Slow down, look, point at it, manipulate it, verify that it did what you want it to do. On the bus at Legacy, we say, make sure that Fifi's doing what you told Fifi to do. And one of my instructors on an initial at Legacy, on the ground school portion of the simulator, was like, this is an Airbus. There's what you told your wife, what your wife heard, and what your wife did or responded. And there are going to be 3 different things. So verify, right? And when I had a student that would be all, just too quick on the draw, that's how mistakes would happen, And I'd give them, I go, man, you're going to get the Jackie Chan Award. And they stop what they're doing. Of course, now we're in flight. They're nervous. They're getting their training. Jackie Chan, what? And I say, the Jackie Chan Award. You're moving way too fast, man. You're slow down. You got to look. You got to verify, okay? We're not racing here. There's no points for getting there first. We just got to get there safe. So, absolutely, that's the best advice both you gentlemen are mentioning, is that just take your time and do things the right way the first time, so you're not going back over and over again, repeating the same mistake. So, today we wanted to, at least I wanted to talk a little bit more about stories from the past and a whole other segment, which we're going to have to save for the next show. And so coming up on a future show of Squawk Ident, we're going to be talking more about general aviation stories and things that we've learned and experiences we've had, because we know a lot of our listeners are in the GA community. And we're also going to talk about the ever so mysterious crash pad. Oh, yeah. You know what I'm talking about. That nasty, filthy place where we cram so many pilots and flight attendants alike into the tight little place. Oh, it's nasty. Now, mind you,
Disgusting.
Not all crash pads are the same. Okay. I actually, full
True.
disclosure, I actually helped run a crash pad in Chicago for many years. And I got to tell you, I'm still very good friends with the individual that still runs it to this day. And between the work that he and I did, we repainted the whole place, decorated it with a big aviation theme and an American flag in the corner. I mean, one of the nicest crash pads I've ever been to. And I'm not just saying that because I helped run it for many years. It was actually as nice as my house. I enjoyed being there. The people there are great. There's a huge vetting process to get in there. And that's what we want to talk about. Because if you're in training and you're going to inevitably end up anywhere, whether they're regional carrier or even corporate or even legacy carrier or major carrier, you start at the bottom, you start on reserve, and you're probably not going to live in a very expensive base. So you're going to need a crash pad, a place to go fly into the night before so that you're available for that 5 or 6 a.m. morning start. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a future show. So if there's anything else that the listeners out there want to listen to or want to learn more about, you've got a couple guys here that know exactly what they've been through and the experience that they've had. Just make sure you write in, send us a message either through social media or through the website or the email through the website, and reach out to us.
Yeah, let us know what you guys want to hear.
Yeah,
We'll talk about it. As you can tell, we can go on and talk about anything. We can go off on tangents. So we'll take whatever ideas you have and we'll run with it. So bring them.
Yeah, we'll do it.
There's even a 50% chance we actually might talk about the initial question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
We'll tie it into aviation somehow. It's kind of like watching My Big Fat Greek Wedding. The word is a Greek word.
It is from the Greek.
That's what he said.
Gotta have Windex.
Windex.
Let's put some Windex on it.
What?
Yeah, that's for sure, But gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to sit down with you and talk to you about our passion of aviation. And hopefully our listeners are enjoying what they hear. So, gentlemen, is there any last thoughts that you might have before we wrap it up today?
I mean, obviously today's world is different than it was a month ago. Be safe, everybody. Stay sane. We will get through this. I think that's kind of in today's society, in today's life, my parting thoughts. Be safe. Be kind to each other. I think, Tony, I think you end every podcast with that. And I think it's a really important thing, especially today.
Thank you so much for noticing that and saying so. Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, same thing. Be safe. Remember, we're all human. Respect everybody else's lives, and reach out to your friends and say hi, whether it's via text or phone call. If you have any elderly folks that you've met before and you haven't spoken to in a while, just say hi to them. Now's a good time to see how everybody's doing. And it's tough, with social distancing, we're social animals, so we need to see and speak to people. And so that might be something that person needs to uplift them up and get through some of this. So yeah, really appreciate everybody listening, and thanks for having me on the show, Tony.
Oh, thank you, gentlemen, both of you. And just in closing here, I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself, on behalf of Rob and Roger. Thank you to all those frontline workers. We say it at the beginning of the show, and we're saying it again at the end of the show. Thank you to the doctors and nurses, the pharmacists, the EMTs, the medical techs, the firefighters, law enforcement, grocery store employees, truck drivers, Amazon workers, and of course, all of the airline employees out there that show up to work every day to provide the essential services that we do. I feel that we are finally over the hump. And listening to whatever news is out there, it looks like, at least in the United States, we're kind of getting over that hump. And we will be seeing some normality very, very soon. Also want to spend a moment and thank another podcast. They've now multiple times have read some of the feedback that I've given them and played some audio and given a really good shout out to the show here on Squawk Ident. And that's the APG podcast. You can find them pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts, and they have a website. I'll put that link in the show notes. That's the Airline Pilot Guy. These guys have been doing this for over a decade, guys and gals, and they have many perspectives. Great crew that they get together once a week, and they talk about aviation news, aviation-related stories in the news, incidents and accidents that have happened around the world. They also spend a lot of time on listener feedback, and they have some great charisma together, and it's a great show. I highly recommend that if you haven't already, make sure you check them out. And also, are you enjoying Squawk Ident? We hope so. And we'd like you to visit our website just to check out some of the little extras that we put in there. As often as I possibly can, I update the show notes, the photos, the episode archive, the flight line photos. And there's a pilot shop there too, where you can get cool Squawk Ident gear, and you can also leave comments and audio feedback as well. You can also contribute to the show, and I know right now it's kind of tough for many people, so if it's a little tough, then don't worry about it. But if you can contribute $1 or $2, it will really help us out with the recurring cost of the show, things like software, marketing materials, and whatnot. Facebook, Instagram users, you can check out Squawk Ident Podcast by searching for Squawk Ident Podcast, and Twitter users can search Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident to follow on the socials. If you're listening to Apple Podcasts, this is the most important thing that we can say to you. In order to kind of boost our ratings in the Apple Podcast app, what we need are reviews. Reviews about the show. Just be honest. What you like, what you don't like. And that would really help us out. So if you could, at the end of this program, take a look. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on the bottom, you're going to see a place where you can leave a review. First thing is you have to subscribe, obviously, to Squawk Ident. Then click on the library button on the bottom of the screen. Click on shows. Then click on Squawk Ident. And then if you scroll down, you'll see under the stars, there's a place where it says write a review. And all you got to do is click. It'll take you about a minute to just say what you will about the show. And that would really, really help us out. One final thank you to Roger and Rob D for being on the show, being great co-hosts. I couldn't, do this without you guys. This is absolutely a lot of fun to produce every week, and it's wonderful to just be able to talk to you guys. So thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you,
being
Tony.
here.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to listen to this grateful aviator. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other.